colleagues, we are going to start off by reading a proclamation on behalf of Terry Williams. Terry, can you just wave so everybody can see who you are and you can be appropriately honored and embarrassed all at the same time? This is a proclamation on behalf of the entire City Council for you, Terry. Whereas Terry Williams has served the city for 31 years as an employee of the Auditor's Office, the Bureau of Licenses, the Revenue Bureau, and the Revenue Division. And whereas Terry is retiring from the city today on November 1st, 2017, and whereas Terry is a dedicated civic leader and volunteer, most recently, she served as the Tax Division Manager and Deputy Director of the Revenue Division. She has also served the public as the chair of the OSCPA State and Local Tax Project Committee and organizer of the Oregon Small Business Fair. And whereas Terry has skillfully led the city through several high-profile, high-risk projects, including the implementation of several new large-scale revenue programs with focus, determination, finesse, and her ability to effectively solve complex problems. And whereas Terry has been a leader in the development of staff, and her influence has helped develop many other leaders within the city. And whereas Terry has established and maintained key relationships with city staff and stakeholders through her talent, trustworthiness, experience, and her ability to make hard work both rewarding and fun. And whereas the city of Portland is grateful for Terry's exemplary service through her entire lengthy career with the city. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2017, Terry Williams Day in Portland, and encourage all residents to observe this day.
Joe. You went to school. Yeah.
His political skills.
He's aged much better than I have.
Thomas, we'll just follow your lead.
We're going to do 3 around for blinks. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. I won't shake your hand. I have a call.
Staff are asking if they get the day off.
Terry gets a day off.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah, Terry, take the rest of the week off, too. You've earned it. All right, good morning, everybody. This is the morning session of the Portland City Council, November 1st, 2017. Carla, please call the roll.
Udaly,
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Our usual statement, I'm going to abridge it. I think everybody here has probably heard this statement ad nauseum. The name of the game here is let's respect everyone. People come up, they testify, they have opinions that may differ from your own. Treat them with respect, hear them out. It's always an opportunity to learn something new and different. Do not disrupt people's public testimony. Do not disrupt council. deliberations. If you do so, you'll be asked to leave. If you are asked to leave and you do not do so, you're subject to arrest for trespassing. And we, as usual, don't want that to happen. We'd rather just have the conversation here. During public testimony, you'll see there's a light on the panel. Typically, you'll get 3 minutes to testify unless we have a lot of people testifying or we're short on time. 2.5 minutes into your testimony or 30 seconds before it's over, the yellow light blinks. When your time is up, when your time is up, a red light goes off. Please, no verbal expressions of support or opposition. Just a thumbs up or a thumbs down typically works really well for all of us. I just want to make a couple of quick housekeeping notes. There have been requests that we improve the PowerPoint system. I want you to know that my office and technology and the clerk's office are seeking to improve that. They are in process. My understanding is we need a new laptop that has been ordered, and there's some other technical fixes that are underway. So while those improvements have not been made in time for today's session, they are in fact underway. So thank you, Carla, for that. Thank you, Mustafa, for your hard work on that wherever you are today. Second of all, colleagues, I will need to take a brief leave of absence at 11 o'clock this morning, and I apologize for that. I'll turn the gavel over to the council president at that particular time. So with that, Carla, please call the first items, communications.
Item 1170, request of Doug Peterson to address council regarding Peterson's on Morrison remodel of parking structure.
And while they're coming up, colleagues, I just want to report that at the end of the last series of presentations, I indicated that I would have my staff meet with the folks from Peterson and orchestrate communication with Prosper Portland. That has happened, and I'm grateful for the continued communication. Why don't we read all 5 of the communications at the same time and have them all come up at once?
1171, a request of David D. Beller to address council regarding Peterson store and parking garage remodel. 1172, request of Shaniqua Vanterpool to address council regarding how important Peterson's is to the community. 1173, request of John McClellan Conway to address council regarding Peterson's at 911 Southwest Morrison. 1174, request of Michael R. Vandiver to address council regarding Peterson's at 911 Southwest Morrison and continuing operation.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good
And if you
morning.
could just state your name for the record.
Certainly.
And I forgot to mention this doesn't apply to you, I'm sure, but if anybody testifies today who is a registered lobbyist, please let us know that. That's required. If you're here representing an organization, that's helpful too. Good morning,
Hi.
sir.
My name is Michael Vandiver. I've worked for Peterson's just short of 1 month, 26 years. Let's talk about the stats regarding the building up at Morrison. The people that run businesses there, such as Mother Goose, have been there for 40 years. Peterson's has been there for 34 years. Portland Swimwear in operations for 20 years at 4th and Alder at a parking structure, and it has moved to Morrison 3 years ago. Consider this one fact: 100 years of business in the city of Portland by 3 companies. That's amazing, isn't it? They produce jobs, taxes, and in our case, we also sell lottery, which those dollars go towards civic development. These buildings have vendors, these businesses have vendors in the hundreds. Employees benefit by wages, health care, and holiday pay, depending upon whether or not they're full-time or part-time. This comes to the expense of the employer. Small businesses cannot increase wages by taxing the populace, unlike city government. What does the city do for the average citizen? Well, let's use a few examples. Number one, they build bike paths on streets to make it safer for bikers. Last Sunday, for example, Dylan Rivera was on television, and he was helping decommission 18 different motorhomes that were dilapidated at the cost of the city of $1,000. Further expenses to decommission these vehicles are going to cost $2,000 extra per vehicle. Increasing low-income housing at taxpayer costs for those in need is an important thing also the city is doing. The fourth thing I was going to bring up was the 5% pay raise that the city has offered police officers to move into the city so they were part of the community. These expenses out of the taxpayers' pockets. This is the discretion of all 5 of you council members. Small businesses don't have that luxury. Let's get to the point why I'm here today. The city is willing to spend money on a project it deems fit to remodel the parking structure at 10th and Morrison. It's a 45-year-old building. It does need some help. So let's spend another 5% on this garage project. Reward these businesses who have paid the price for being successful businesses and allow them to stay during the construction. Notice that they're drawing on the next page. It shows 9th and Morrison westward to 10th Avenue. It's physically impossible to close all 4 walk-ups and elevators at the same time. The city has said that they wish to keep this parking structure viable during this period of time. They have contracts with Target, and the city needs that parking structure. So my idea is this: keep the 3 major businesses in that building, move them over once part of the construction is done, and you all can do this. You can sign this agreement today stating that grandfathered businesses get to stay in the building because of their good service to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, my name's David Beller. I'm born in Portland, a longtime resident. Went to Reynolds High School, graduated from Portland State. Lived in Hawaii for about 10 years and then moved back here in '91 and have been here ever since. I started working for Peterson's, I guess 7, 8 years ago. Prior to that, I had a year at Fred Meyer's. Got laid off there at the height of the recession because it's a large corporation, you're just a number there. Some guy who works for Kroger back east said, oh, we're gonna cut these hours, and I was gone. I went to work for Mr. Peterson a few months after that. Took a while to find a job back then. After working for him for 3 months, I became ill. I discovered I was diabetic. I had a surgery and couldn't work for over 3 months. Mr. Peterson is the kind of man who says, when you're able to come back, you still have a job here. He's also told me in the past that the people that work for him are his most valuable resource. He hires with no regard to race, religion, age, medical status. He is a benefit to the community. I'm 60 years old now. If I were to have to go look for another job, who would hire me? I have many medical conditions. I have a job, and I will continue to have a job because that's the kind of person he is, and that's the service he provides for this community. I can't think of another business where I could go to and someone would look at a 60-year-old man with various medical conditions and say, sure, we'll hire you. It wouldn't happen, but it happens here. That business has been there for 34 years. Now they want to remodel the building, and it does need help, but I've looked at the plans, and there are a bunch of tiny little spaces all along the street. And it doesn't make business sense to kick out businesses that have been successful and paid taxes for 40 years, 35 years, and replace them with a bunch of new businesses when we all know that most small businesses fail within the first 5 years, and all those spaces are going to be empty. And you're going to kick out a successful business which has paid taxes for many, many years and provided a service to the community, jobs, and a benefit to the people that shop there. It makes no sense whatsoever to close a business like that and just kick them out of that location. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning. I'm Shaniqua Vanderpool. I've been with Peterson's for 1.5 years now. 2 months ago, my island, my hometown of Charlotte Amalie, St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, was hit by Hurricane Irma. And at this very moment, my family is temporarily unemployed. And if Peterson's and Morrison has to go, that does not only affect me, but it affects my family too, as well. Because at this moment, I'm responsible for providing for what they need until they get back on their feet. And there are other 3 stores, and if everybody, all the employees go to the other 3 stores, hours will be cut. And if that's the case, I don't know how long it will take me to find the next job to support my family at this very tragic time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodness. Good morning, esteemed council. My name is John Conway. I am a proud resident of America's It City. I went to Lewis and Clark College. I graduated from Lake Ridge High School. In 1985, I lost vision in my right eye. In 2006, I had the eye removed. From then on, I was suffering from cataracts until about 2 years ago when I had cataract surgery. For the first time after 8 years, I was able to take on a job, and Doug Peterson hired me. I've been working for Peterson's for the past year, and going to work after being out of work for 8 years is so dynamic, so life-giving, so amazing that to describe it doesn't do it justice. But I have another tacit on this. One of the things about Peterson's and working at Peterson's that's absolutely magical is I become the first exposure to out-of-towners. There is nothing that makes my Oregonian heart burst with joy than somebody walking into Peterson's and looking around and saying, "Where's your vodka?" I take a moment and I say, "Welcome to the Proud 33rd. We don't sell vodka, but we have a lot of other magical things to show you." I get to spend a lot of time with people from out of town who've never been to our proud city. And I open their eyes to the delights and the wonders that we have to offer. It's exciting, and we're the first exposure. And not many people think of Peterson's as the first place that tourists come. The hotels are the hotels. A Hilton is a Hilton is a Hilton is a Hilton. But Peterson's is absolutely Portland and has been for 34 years. Before I worked at Peterson's, I had a different evaluation of it. It was a place where you could get soda pop and candy at any time of night or day. Now it's my workplace. I love it, and I recognize that it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. There's a lot of history there in a city that has lost a lot of its history. How many people remember the Arctic Circle that's now Herzog Jewelers? There's a lot of stuff that this city is missing now that is going away. I went to, the Jewelers on Park and Morrison. Anyway, I can't remember the name.
Brothers.
Not Zell Brothers.
Not
No,
Zell.
the Zell Brothers went first. But Carl Grieve.
Grieve.
I went to high school with Jimmy Grieve. So this city has an amazing amount of history, but we're burying it. Anyway, don't let us lose any more of our history. I love this city, and I'd like to keep it as much intact as is there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson, you can just pull the mic over if that's
okay,
better.
very good.
Yeah, it moves. I should have told you.
Okay.
Yeah, you can actually slide the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's not nailed down or anything. Okay.
Thank you, and thank you for hearing us. Did this pass out. This is an op-ed that I wrote for the Portland Business Journal, and it really tells the story of Peterson's. So it tells a lot of it. What I'd like to talk about, this is the petitions our customers have signed in the store. It's building thousands of signatures. I turned some in here, a couple months ago, but it's built up to this big of a stack. I did give us complete set, the same set that's here to Commissioner Fish's office on Monday. I talked to Todd Longren on Monday. My concern is Prosper Portland just wants us out. They've set it up that way, and once we're out, we're gone. I just think that's terrible that these are our customers. All these signatures are our customers. But in a way, they're your customers too, because they're voters. That's the stack of people that have signed the petition, and a whole lot of them made comments. And if you get a chance, that set that I gave Commissioner Fish's office might be available to take a look at. And you have the ones from before. I feel like, there can be accommodation for us to be there during much of the remodel. And like I have said before, the major construction's on the ends of the building, not in the middle of the block. And their intention is to keep the storefronts from some time before they start changing that. So when they say nobody can be there, it's just an excuse. They want us out. Starbucks at Pioneer Square, they were there during the entire remodel. They moved barricades and fences around, and they had big banners saying Starbucks is still open during the remodel. There are ways to do that. And if Prosper Portland's saying it just can't be done, I think that's not really true, and it certainly can be accommodated. And these are customers that are using the MAX line. They're stopping at that stop, which is going to be open during the entire time of the remodel. It's the major transit stop for the light rail and for the streetcar and also the library. And there should be some way to accommodate us for a while. And I want to be there when it's done. I added another store. I purchased Georgia's Market at 12th and Stark. I've got close to $250,000 of my own money that I put into that location. And, I have an interest in downtown Portland. I want to be part of downtown Portland, and I'm just being pushed out. And I need the council members' help, because without the council members' help, a resolution or something to keep us there, we're gone. And I'm sorry for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for your testimony. We appreciate it. Thank you. I have pulled consent item 1180. I'm wondering if there are other consent items that have been pulled.
I have had no other requests.
Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish? Aye. Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the consent agenda is adopted. Please call item 1180.
1180, appoint Elizabeth Fouts to the Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Board of Trustees for a term to expire December 31, 2020.
Well, good morning, colleagues. The reason I've pulled this item is, as you know, it is the policy of my office to actually not put appointments on consent agenda, and I'm still not entirely clear how that happens, so I apologize for the confusion. But the important thing is today we have Ms. Fouts here, who is being appointed, and we have Sam Hutchison, who's the Director of FPD&R, here to introduce the appointment. Thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioners. Sam Hutchison, Bureau Director of FPD&R. The Board of Trustees for the FPD&R consists of 5 members, one which is the mayor or the mayor's designee. We have a fire representative, a police representative, and 2 citizen representatives. The citizen representatives are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. Ms. Fouts, who I will formally introduce here in just a minute, was selected by work with Dan Saltzman's office and then vetted with the mayor's office, and the mayor has presented her for your approval. I'll go ahead and let Elizabeth Fouts here give her just a little bit of background on her history and why she'd like to be a board trustee.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Fouts. I'm an attorney with 17 years of legal experience and a Portland resident. I have worked for the Standard since 2008, and I currently manage the transactional legal teams for our insurance services group as well as our asset management group side of the business. I've experienced working with retirement plans as well as disability and life insurance, and I'd be happy to serve as a trustee for the fire and police disability and death benefit plan. I'd like to serve the city as well as our hardworking police and firefighters. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Fritsch?
Could you just explain to people at home, what does the board do?
The board oversees the fund as well as sets the policy for the Bureau. And they also approve the budget and the funds budget and the payout. This is a unique situation to where the city charter has given power to the Board of Trustees to oversee the fund and oversee FPDNR. We pay out approximately, I want to say, $150 million per year in benefits, both retirement and disability benefits. We do that through a tax levy to which you approve, but the board is the one who, we put the budget together, the board approves the budget, the board approves the tax levy that we need, and then it is passed on to you. So I, as a bureau director, look to them for guidance as far as policy and direction to go with what we do in the bureau. I also work with, obviously, with Commissioner Saltzman as my commissioner in charge, but mostly they're the ones who oversee the direction that the fund is run and how the bureau is operated.
So the Fund for Police and Fire Disability and Retirement is paid by property taxes as we go, correct?
Correct.
So there isn't any, there'd never be a claim to the standard, for example, for a life insurance policy for police and fire?
No, there's no life. This is, the only benefits we offer are retirement and disability, and then we offer survivor benefits to surviving spouses and children.
Paid directly by the fund rather than
Yes.
by an outside
Correct.
insurer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions or discussion? Is there any public testimony on this item?
Mr. Walsh want to testify?
Great. All right, you can cool your heels for a little bit. We'll hear from Mr. Walsh.
Good morning. My name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. We were going to pull this item exactly, I think, why you pulled it, Mayor. We like the idea of introducing the appointees to commissions and committees. We'd like to get to know them a little bit. I realize it's difficult to do that, but we commend you for doing it, for pulling this item and introducing the people and why they want to serve on a committee. And when you take it out of consent agenda and put it on regular business, you allow somebody like Commissioner Fritz to ask questions about it. And she asked most of the questions that I would have asked. So again, this is good news. We commend you for pulling it. And we hope in the future that when it's possible, that all of you who appoint people on commissions, bring them in and celebrate them. You know, they should be celebrated. They don't get any money. So we got to do something for them. At least acknowledge them and say thank you. You know, because you're going to get criticized. You don't even get paid. At least when you guys get criticized, you get paid anyway. So we really like these volunteers and we really like staff. So again, we commend you on that. And it's nice to say something positive for a change.
Very good. Carla, please call the roll.
Daly?
I don't know where that woman went. Okay, well.
She's in the back.
All right, congratulations and, oh, there, Joe, yeah. And thank you for your service. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you very much for serving. My policy, when I'm suggesting appointments, is if the person who's being appointed wants to come, then we put it on the regular agenda. If not, we put it on consent so that we don't ask them to volunteer their time again. I'm very pleased to see a second woman serving on the Board of Trustees, and I hope we're developing folks in the pipeline so that our Board of Trustees can also reflect the diversity in our community in other ways. Thank you very much. Aye.
Fish?
Yeah, let me echo the words of my colleagues and thank you for stepping up and serving. And we're also very grateful that the Standard is such a major employer in our city, has chosen to stay in our city, and in fact is across the street from us. So welcome. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, thank you, Ms. Fouts, for your willingness to serve. And I also wanted to recognize her predecessor in this position, Justin Delaney, who has served as one of the public trustees since at least 2006, when voters approved major reforms to the FPD in our system. And he helped to see those reforms into place that we exist with today. So thank you for your service, Justin Delaney, and thank you, Ms. Fouts. Aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I'm thrilled with this appointment. And Ms. Fouts, I just have to add my name to the list of well-wishers. This is a very, very complicated position to which you're being appointed, and it requires somebody with a deep technical skill set, which you bring to the table, and it requires somebody who understands the bigger picture, and you actually alluded to that in your commentary here this morning in response to Commissioner Fritz's question. So I think you're exactly the kind of person that we need for this board. I'm thrilled that you are willing to serve. As Mr. Walsh indicated, the remuneration isn't particularly good, and it's a really intense and important position. And what really makes this city go isn't what happens up here, it's what happens in the kinds of opportunities that you are taking your time and your energy committing to the city as a whole. So thank you for that. I vote aye, and the appointment is very much gratefully approved. Thank you for your service. Thank you both for coming in. Colleagues, we're pulling the next item, the first item is certain. Could you please read that item?
Item 1175, proclaim November to be Native American Heritage Month.
So, colleagues, we're returning this proclamation to my office. It's going to be heard pre-gavel next week. What happened was we had a number of people associated with this as guests who could not come in this morning. We had some last-minute cancellations, and so we decided to pull it. But with the agreement of my colleagues, I'd like to suspend rules for a moment. There may be people who showed up this morning for this particular item who'd like to have an opportunity to testify in lieu of coming next week. Is there anybody here who'd like to support the proclamation today rather than coming back next week? Hearing none, then that will be moved back to my office. Next item, please, 1176.
Accept the Quarterly Technology Oversight Committee report from the Chief Administrative Officer.
Colleagues, this
Mayor,
is
can I just acknowledge for the record that we're actually taking up a time certain at a time certain? And I just, this is progress.
Well,
So
it's only going to last until we change our clocks again at the end of the week, no doubt.
whether this was planned or this is just dumb luck, I think we're on the right track, so.
Dumb
welcome.
luck. Colleagues, this is the Quarterly Technology Oversight Committee report from the Chief Administrative Officer, Tom Reinhardt, and represents the reporting period from July through September of 2017. This committee, as you all know, meets monthly with project sponsors to review any issues or concerns that might pop up, and then they share those issues with the City Council and city staff. For this report, we're going to hear about two specific projects. The first is the BDS Portland Online Permitting System, otherwise known as POPS, and the second is BTS, the Data Center Move Project. I'll now turn it over to our TOC representatives and staff to provide us with the report. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Jen Clodius, Senior Management Analyst with the Office of
And
Management
Jen, I'm
and
sorry to
Finance.
interrupt. Commissioner Fish, I think, is referring to our monitors.
Now we have it.
We've struggled with the monitors. Colleagues, the monitors are actually going to be replaced as part of the upgrade. They've looked
Yeah.
at these. These are hopelessly antiquated, so we're all going to have new monitors.
Well, I
in the
just
very near
wanted to be
future.
clear, we now have the PowerPoint on our monitors, so.
Right, you only show PowerPoints. The TV screen isn't on yours, but it's working now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So good.
Thank you.
For the other people.
Sorry to interrupt. I
No worries.
apologize.
So with me are Jeff Baer, Director of BTS, Mike Lynch for Commissioner Saltzman, and Josh Mitchell, who was appointed by former Commissioner Novick. Your other TOC members are Ken Neubauer for Commissioner Fish, Dr. Wilf Pinfold, appointed by former Mayor Hales, and Diana Garcia for Commissioner Fritz. The TOC, as the mayor said, advises the Chief Administrative Officer, Tom Reinhardt. We are here to present the information from the TOC's quarterly report to Mr. Reinhardt for July through September. That quarter, as the mayor said, the TOC followed two projects, the POPS and the data center move. Recently, TOC has been working with the City Budget Office on their software RFP. We will project each project's dashboard. The dashboard contains information from the project management staff, from the quality assurance folks, and the TOC. Mike and Jeff and Josh will do the updates.
Josh Mitchell, Director of Engineering with Phase 2 Technology. I've been serving on the TOC for close to 5 years now. It's been a long haul. So I will take pops because I've been here almost the entire time that the previous project existed. I will say that we've been very impressed with the continued discovery process, the stopgaps that are being put in place to ensure that the next project is highly successful. We've been impressed with the effort to do the upgrade to Amanda 6 database for the purpose of getting the data center move complete and stable and working well with that project. That has been good.
I could just interrupt you. First of all, please, all of you try to not explain the acronyms. And secondly, I've been wanting to know for years, what does Amanda stand for?
I actually don't think it's an acronym. It's just what they named
Pet
it.
name for the computer, like Hal.
Commissioner Fritz, I think over 70% of the voters made very clear they understood what Amanda stood for.
Shut up. Thank you, Commissioner Fish.
It is the name of the platform that would run reporting and the services behind reporting for the Bureau of Development Services. So
Thank you.
that is Amanda. And there's I think a concerted effort to ensure that the future project will be successful and put it together in a way that it can be. This last presentation that we received from the team was really focused on how approaches to make sure that that can be successful. So we have not included a red, green, blue, red, yellow, green status because we don't feel that the project is at a start point yet. But we are happy to see that discovery is proceeding as it should. So that is the feedback that we can provide at this time.
Thank you.
And I'll add a couple more comments to Josh. And for the record, I'm Jeff Baer with the Bureau of Technology Services, and appreciate the opportunity to be in front of the council talking about these two projects. They're both very important. Obviously, the POPS program, we're taking it into a new phase to upgrade the existing system. Some significant issues that occurred over the reporting period were to get it up to a supported version, version 6, so that was good news. We have been out of support for quite a number of years, so that actually having the vendor support the system was a relatively big milestone for us to achieve during this reporting period. We are now moving forward into the next phase. We've just recently hired an outside external consultant for quality assurance to come in, review our plan, and also to make sure that we are on the right implementation approach. We've heard very loud and clear from our TOC members that we don't want to go forward with a big bang approach. We want to look at it for putting it into different cycles of implementation, and we are on that track as well. We've been working very closely with Commissioner Daly and her staff to make sure that they're informed as we are making progress and have a really good partnership arrangement with the Bureau of Development Services and the group that we are putting together to put that in place. So appreciate that support.
And the other project is the data center move.
Hi, I'm Michael Lynch. Happy to be here for the first time. So this is a project that actually is nearly done. So it's actually a no news is good news situation. So I've been on the TOC for about a year, and I've seen this project move into execution mode really effectively. And there's really, at this point, not much risk. It's going to wrap up next month, since it's the first, I can say that. And no real risks. I think it's probably the best data center move I've ever seen.
Great. I would second that. It has been a very effective data center move.
Considering the complexity and the retiring of old systems and old hardware, it was very, very smooth, very well run.
And I'll just add a couple of quick updates. As of this week, we're actually 90% complete with the project and migrating all the applications out of the Portland building into the new location out in Washington County. So that's a major accomplishment. And the last 10%, we're on track to get that completed here in the next couple of weeks. We move very quickly after that into what we call decommissioning phase. So decommissioning all the hardware, the servers, whatever's left in the Portland building, And right behind us is the construction crew ready to start the remodel of the Portland building. So we've got a hard deadline in December to meet. We're on track to do that. So really pleased to see that occur. Our next major phase of this project, which we'll get into early next year, is disaster recovery and backup. We have a site located in Denver, Colorado, so we'll have a backup site outside the region for disaster recovery aspects of that.
Commissioner Fritz?
Why did you choose Denver rather than Eastern Oregon?
We chose Denver because the firm we selected, Via West, with the location out in Hillsborough, that's their backup center they have in Denver. It's a complete replication of the existing center out there, so it'll be very familiar with our team to be on site. It'll look exactly the same as what we have out here.
Thank you.
Very good. Colleagues, any further questions before we open this to testimony? Very good. Thank you so much. Any public testimony? I've lost my esteemed clerk. There she is. Hey, Carla. Is there any public testimony on this item?
Sorry. This is a report, so we don't have a sign-up sheet set out.
Move to accept the report.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Fritz. Please call the roll.
Daly?
Well, thank you for the report, and I just want to thank Lori Levy and the whole POPs team, who deserve credit for completing the upgrade to Amanda 6, whatever Amanda may or may not stand for. The next phase of the project will involve assembling, prioritizing, and budgeting for all requirements from all the bureaus that participate in the development review process. Lori and the POPs team will need to carefully consider all bureaus' needs, and my staff has asked bureaus to identify additional resource needs associated with the POPs project. We need bureau staff to work together to make this project successful. If we need to allocate additional resources to help make that happen, I think we should, and I'll be back to ask for that. Thanks again to Lori Levy and the POPs team, as well as the staff from PBOT, BES, Water, Fire, and Parks, who are participating in this process. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you very much for your work, and especially the volunteers on the committee. It's really great. Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for initiating this and keeping it going. Obviously, Jeff and Jen have started it for a long time, and we appreciate that. I do hope that Amanda is paying attention to details just as much as I do, in fact, probably better. And thank you for telling me that it's not an acronym, because I stopped looking to find out now.
Just really well named.
Yeah, well, very nice. Thank you, and we'll look forward to your next report. Aye.
Fish?
Good report. Thank you for your work. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I want to thank the committee. Thank you, Mr. Lynch, for serving as my representative on that committee, and thank you also, Mr. Mitchell, for your service as well, and it's good to see so many green lights on the report. Aye.
Wheeler?
My dad pointed out to me from time to time that I was not the brightest bulb. And he said, if you want to be successful, what you need to do is surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are, and then listen to them. The TOC membership definitely qualifies, and they spend a tremendous amount of time going through these very technical and important systems, and then they color code it for people like me. And so I'm thrilled with the amount of time and energy that you put into these really important projects. As you know, when the projects work well, nobody hears about it. And for the most part, they don't know about it. It's sort of like your backbone. It's there, it's really important. If it's working, you don't think about it, but the minute it starts to hurt, it's all you can think about. I think it's fabulous to have you guys really watchdogging this stuff, coming in here, seeing all green. It makes me very, very happy. So thank you for a very uneventful presentation. I vote aye. The report's accepted. Thank you all.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Since we're a little ahead of schedule on the other time certainties,
We are.
and Annie Von Berg is here, could I ask that we take up 1189 so she can do this and get out?
I see no disagreement with this. Please call 1189.
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation to jointly conduct in-water sampling in the Willamette River downtown reach.
Commissioner Fish.
The purpose of this ordinance, Mayor and colleagues, is to authorize BES to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation to jointly conduct in-water sediment sampling near city and ODOT-owned outfalls, and they're specifically identified in the ordinance. Between 2008 and 2011, the DEQ and several other interested parties, including the city, conducted 2 phases of sediment investigation between Willamette River Miles 12 and 16, which is also the downtown reach. Excuse me. Those investigations identified potential data gaps and areas of sediment contamination that led DEQ to conclude that more investigation is necessary to confirm that certain areas of the downtown reach will not pose a threat to human health or the environment. And DEQ has determined that additional sediment sampling for contaminants of interest in the downtown reach near ODOT-owned outfalls described in the ordinance and city-owned outfalls described in the ordinance will help fill some of those data gaps. The estimated total budget for this work is $220,000. The cost of the work would be evenly divided between the city and ODOT. Thus, the city's expected costs are in the neighborhood of $110,000. If the project costs exceed the estimated budget, ODOT and the city will amend the IGA to reflect the new budget and continue to share the costs evenly. Welcome, Annie. Did I leave anything out?
That's perfect.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I apologize, I was unprepared to actually present on this. I thought this was just a vote, so I'm here to answer any questions if there are any.
Commissioner Fritz.
In plain language, what is between River Mile 12 and 16?
That's the downtown reach area, so it's just above the Portland Harbor Superfund. It's an area that's been identified to look for contaminants that may impact human and environmental health.
So could you tell me which bridges it's between?
Yes, it's approximately between the Broadway Bridge and just downstream of the Ross Island Bridge.
Oh, so.
It's a good stretch there.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And when would we get the results?
I'll check with our project staff. We should be sampling here in a few months, so hopefully by spring we should know. DEQ will be reporting on those results.
And do we need to be concerned about swimming in the Willamette in that area?
No, this is just to be looking at chemical contamination within the sediment. It does not look at bacterial contamination, which is a primary concern for swimming.
But there could be chemical pollutants in the sediment?
That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
To see if there are. We're not sure if there are any.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions? Thank you. Is there any public testimony on this item? Very good. Come on up. 3 minutes. Name for the record, please. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog X. One of the concerns I have when we're talking sediment is that, as you know, when we have high water levels, which we had, a lot of times that sediment will move in different locations. So it might be in one location and then it might move to another location. So again, on this type of testing, what I look at is that on the submersible land itself, I always look at that is the responsibility of the state. If you do a submersible land lease, you're going to be dealing with the state on that to have control out over the water. And I don't see anywhere in here where the state's going to fund anything. I mean, again, it's their per se sediment.
It's jointly funded, Lightning, by the state and the city.
Okay.
That's the ordinance before us.
Okay. I wanted to make that very clear from the, you have
Evenly
the,
split, including any overruns.
okay, you have the Oregon Department of Transportation jointly, which would be the state, with the downtown reach. Now, my position here is that when you're talking the Transportation Department again, is that on the sediment itself, on the actual tests, is the public going to have access to that information? will the public be able to review those tests? Now, Commissioner Fritz brought up a real good question here on the swimming possibilities in the river. Now, I work with the EPA very closely, even went to their offices and had conversations on the Superfund cleanup. And my position is that various people from the EPA said, I said, well, what do you think about me going out there and swimming in the river? What do you think after all these tests we have out in front of us and we're looking at all the samplings? And they kind of laughed at me and said, you don't want to swim in the river. I said, really? I said, so you're stating that to me and other people are stating that feel free to swim in the river. Now, the point that Commissioner Fritz brought up is a really good point, is that when you're testing that sediment, and if that sediment is coming back and saying there's chemicals in there and different things in there, well, you would obviously think that that sediment leaches into the water, obviously, that could be a concern for the swimmers. So I would caution on you saying it's just okay to swim in there until you actually see these tests on a regular basis and understand we have a Superfund cleanup site. We have a site that is so toxic and contaminated that you don't even want to eat the fish. Now, I'm surprised you're not glowing right now, Mayor Wheeler. I'm surprised you're not glowing because you're taking some big chances there. And whether you agree with me or not, these tests are very important, and I hope that the public has access to them. And I'd like to review them and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the record, I swim in the river. I don't eat the sediment at the bottom.
Well, the water itself and the chemicals in the water, which leaches out of the sediment, can go into your skin.
We'll agree
And
to-
trust me, as a RN over here, she could probably substantiate that.
Well, I probably have many other much less healthy habits than that.
Okay,
But
thank you.
for your testimony. Could
Mayor,
you please call 1185?
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Just want to say for the record that, as you know, the Willamette River is subject to lots
Oh, yeah,
of
I forgot
different
about- I
tests.
know. Okay.
And we have some publicly accessible databases that report on those test results. And Lightning, if you're interested, before Annie goes, she can give you the links to the utility websites that show that data. You raised an important question that we should continue to be transparent with the data that we collect, and we are, but we'll give you the links so that you can do your own inquiry and make your own judgment about whether you want to swim with the mayor. So
Very
thank
good.
you.
Very good.
So thank you.
Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Well, thank you for the presentation and for getting this done. There is, of course, an additional potential equity impact of people who eat the fish that are in this particular reach. And so I think that that's of concern, especially for fish that stay there. We need to know, are they safe to eat? And if so, how much of it can one eat? Although that's still going to be challenging for people who may rely on the river to give them their food. So I'm glad we're getting this done. Thank you, Commissioner. Aye.
Fish?
Thank you, Annie. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Excellent work. Thanks, Commissioner. Thanks, Annie. Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Please call 1185.
Enhance community service opportunities and strengthen the transparency and accountability of city advisory bodies.
Colleagues, this item has been rescheduled to November 8th, 2017 at 9:30 a.m. as part of the regular agenda. Please call item 1191.
1191,
1191, please.
assess property for sidewalk repair for the Portland Bureau of Transportation.
Colleagues, this is a second reading of a non-emergency ordinance. Testimony has already been taken. Please call the roll. Unless there's any further discussion, seeing none, call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Please call item 1186.
Revise First Amendment to the Intergovernmental Agreement for Cost Sharing of Levy-Ready Columbia Expenses Not Covered by IFA Loans to extend program, provide additional funding, broaden allowable expenses, and amend parties to agreement.
Ken, before you jump in on this, I notice we have a class here. Where are you all from? Lincoln High School. And which class?
It's called Urban Exploration.
Urban Exploration. Welcome to Portland City Hall. We're glad to have you here. Thanks.
Do we have any Constitution team members here?
Yeah, over here.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, you bet. Great. Thanks all for being here. Mr. Rust, thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the council. For the record, I'm Ken Rust, the city's chief financial officer. The ordinance in front of you today might look very familiar because on May 31st of this year, you adopted a very similar ordinance which included the state as one of the parties to the amended IGA for additional support of the Columbia River Levee project. Subsequent to the passage of that initial amended ordinance, the state determined that they were not going to be able to provide funds through this particular mechanism in this intergovernmental agreement, so they no longer can be a party to the IGA. This particular ordinance today amends that original revised IGA, strikes the state as a party, and continues with the rest of the funding plan that had already been approved by the different parties to the IGA, including the city. The amount that the city is responsible for was approved as part of the adopted fiscal year 18 budget. Subsequent also to the filing of this document, the state's been working on mechanism for them to provide the funding, and they will be making a grant through Business Oregon to the project in the amount that they were originally scheduled to pay for. We are the administrators of an agreement with Business Oregon as part of this project, so we will be bringing another ordinance to you to be able to accept those grant funds and distribute it according to the plan. That will be a subsequent ordinance that we'll be filing over the course of the next few weeks. So basically, this does nothing other than remove the state from the original revised IGA. Everything else remains the same.
Very good. Commissioner Fritz.
And if they do change their way of doing things, they can come back in again later to give what they thought they were going to be able to give?
Commissioner, I think for this particular purpose, it's a relatively small overall change to the total budget. The state share is $267,000. They're going to approach that through a grant through Business Oregon. So I don't see any particular change for this particular piece of the program. Whether that's the end of funding and other arrangements for the Levee Ready Columbia project remains to be seen, but that would be done differently and may come through in a different funding mechanism if the state's a partner.
But if they're going to give their share to a different organization, why would it not then reduce our costs?
The plan was that if the state didn't fund in the amount that they were originally scheduled to fund, that the budget for the project overall would be reduced so that none of the partners picked up a larger share. It would remain the same. The scope of work would be reduced. And so now what we've done with the state being able to fund it through Business Oregon is the original scope will be executed, and there's no change to any of the underlying partners.
Thank you.
I have two questions, Ken. It's for the benefit of our students. What exactly does the Chief Financial Officer do for the City of Portland? And what's unique about your reporting requirements?
Commissioner Fish, that's a very good question. When people ask me what I do, I basically say I solve problems. I solve financial problems for the city, and luckily for me, there's lots of those to solve. Never seems to be a
Well, strike
shortage.
that from the record, please. We don't need that cluttering up the record, and we have some, thank you.
But on a more serious note, I work with the bureaus, I work with you as the council to develop policies and financial plans that underpin basically what the city does with an eye towards long-term fiscal health and sustainability for the city.
And as we learned when your position was in some doubt a couple years ago, it's not unusual in the public and private sectors to have a chief financial officer who oversees the financial health of an organization. In this case, we're a city that has about a $3.8 billion consolidated budget, so it's a big responsibility, and you are ultimately the person we've entrusted to be overseer of that whole financial system. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I report both to the city's chief administrative officer, and I report directly to you as the city council. And
So what's unique about that? Because that's a dual report where you have a nominal supervisor, but you're also by rule charged with reporting to the council. So what's the intent?
I think the intent was to make sure that my voice as the city's chief financial officer could be heard directly to the council, and that my opinion on financial matters would not be necessarily work through another more indirect reporting relationship so that you could have direct access to me, I could have direct access to you, and to advise you as to impacts of certain kinds of financial undertakings that the city may be considering so that you could make an informed decision.
And let's speak, just to give a hypothetical, there could be an instance where you, the chief financial officer, have a principal disagreement with the chief administrative officer, who's nominally your boss, and under the reporting requirement that the city established, you would be required, in effect, to bring your concerns directly to the council, so the council had the benefit of your perspective and the CAO's perspective.
That's correct. And I can say that over my career at the city, I've never had that situation arise with the relationship between myself and the chief administrative officer. But I think the structure that the position has now helps prevent that and provides a safeguard against that.
You also announced your retirement.
Yes, I have.
And so we're going to have an appropriate opportunity in December to embarrass you here?
That's always up to you. But we will be presenting the city's comprehensive annual financial report or audit to you on December 13th. Actually, today we are proud to announce that we are publishing our CAFR today, 120 days post July 1. My CAFR 120 initiative is successful. My job now is complete at the city, but that's the earliest in modern history that we can ever determine that the city's published its CAFR. Puts us at the cutting edge of governments across the United States.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public testimony on this item? Come on up.
My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog X. Again, I want to have a clear understanding who owns the levy. Now, an issue I have on this is that the state is deciding not to pay their fair share of $267,000. Now, what was stated here is that they might have some option to come back and do it. Well, by this ordinance, it says the state does not want to pay the money. And the state's response to that, which I'll point at Governor Brown on this, due to a new process for allocating anticipated state resources, and the levy-ready Columbia partners have elected to remove the state. A new process of allocating money, isn't that special? Nice line there. Pay up, quit walking away from it. My position on this levy is plain and simple. We need to rebuild the levy. This needs to be one of the largest construction projects in the state of Oregon. We need to use infrastructure dollars to begin analyzing this and understanding. Due to climate change, due to flooding, due to looking around the world currently, we all know that the amount of money that's being spent currently in all different areas. If we lose this levy, what do we lose? We lose the Portland International Airport. You think it's bad in Puerto Rico right now. Imagine this city with this airport with water running through this airport. Imagine that happening. It can happen. We've had floods that have gotten very close to going over the levee, going over that direction, and guess what happens if it ever happens? It will shut this city down as bad as Puerto Rico. We need to be looking at rebuilding this levee and understanding what we have out there is an outdated sandbox for little kids to play with the governor in the sandbox. The Governor Brown needs to start thinking realistically and understanding, rebuild the levee, protect the airport at any and all costs, and understand, mark my words, if it ever goes over that levee, and I've been standing on that levee when it has gotten to the peak, what's called the crown of the levee, and trust me, if it ever goes over that levee, we won't have an airport again. You have a sandbox out there, shouldn't be recertified, shouldn't be up to the specifications of the New Orleans levee, and let me tell you something, if you don't rebuild it, you're gonna lose the airport. And I'm going to point at you, Governor Brown. I'm going to point at you for not negotiating infrastructure dollars and rebuilding this levee, which you know is a sandbox at this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman. Aye. Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Please call 1187.
Direct the Portland Housing Bureau to formally adopt asset management policies and guidelines to help borrowers and sponsors with roles and responsibilities as recipients of funding.
Colleagues, over the years, the city has invested in excess of $300 million into affordable housing. That investment has resulted in over 13,000 units of affordable housing. Today's action would formalize the Portland Housing Bureau's compliance guidelines, and here discussing it is Kurt Krieger, the Director of the Housing Bureau, and Tanya Strigray, who is the Housing Program Coordinator. Thank you both for being here. You're probably just catching your breath, but we appreciate your making the effort to be here on a timely basis.
Thank you very much, Mayor
Thank you and
Wheeler,
good morning.
members of council. Indeed, one of the drawbacks of being 15 minutes away is we're 15 minutes away, so we were watching you on
Timing was perfect.
Great, thank you. Tanya Stangray is our lead in the area of asset management. Javier Mina supervises that part of the Housing Bureau. And what we wanted to do was to take what has been standard operating procedures and codify them under Title 30. Because we had a lot of practices and procedures that were never officially adopted by council. So this in large part is making formal what we've been doing all along anyway. But Tanya is the content expert, and I'll let her speak for herself. She has 5 slides, so this will go quite quickly.
Yeah. So basically, we conduct risk analysis and compliance. And it really is to outline the expectations and responsibilities of the borrowers and the sponsors as it relates to the PHB funding that we provide for affordable housing. We conduct it to be sure that the property is performing as projected, that we are actually serving, it's benefiting the intended populations that we're providing the funds for, and so that the property itself can achieve long-term sustainability. So that's really why we do it, and it's really looking over and being a steward of the funds. Can you change it?
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, I got it. Okay, we want to do that. Okay, so I wanted to just talk a little bit about the households in the PHB regulated units. On average, 50% of renters qualify for a lower AMI than the actual unit that they're in, meaning that 57% of our borrowers, our tenants, are rent burdened, which is pretty scary. 66% of households living in PHB's rental housing earn at a level of 0 to 30%. So extremely low income folks. Here is a slide that talks about the extremely low income renters, as you can, by race and ethnicity. And this is a quick snapshot of the average rents that we have. 75% of PHB's portfolio is 0 and 1 bedroom units. More than 50% of the affordable portfolio is made up of 30 to 50% units. Those are the AMI restricted units between 30 and 50%. 17% of the units have children, and 19% of the extremely low income households are households with children. I wanted to also talk about what's in our pipeline. So we have what we have now. We have a lot of 0 to 1 bedrooms. We have a lot of 30 to 50% AMI, and this is really what PHB has in its pipeline right now, based on the AMI. So 18% of units in the pipeline are 30% and on down. Most of the focus here in the number of units, 1,905 units, are 60% units.
Can I ask a question,
Sure.
Director Krieger, off this slide? Council just made a commitment to substantially increasing the number of permanent supportive housing units, and they serve the poorest of the poor and require additional subsidy. Now, the pipeline chart shows that we're skewing 60% of AMI, which is, so just, could you put the human face on that for me? 60% of median family income for let's say, a family of 4 is roughly how much? Ballpark.
$50,000.
Okay, so it's people being squeezed in this market, but it's unlikely that these are people also we're seeing on the sidewalks. And so my question to you, Director Krieger, is, given the council's renewed focus on meeting street homelessness and permanent supportive housing units, are we going to be changing the pipeline prospectively so that we are capturing the units we're going to need to meet our commitment to permanent supportive housing goals?
I think so, because embedded in this information are the current portfolio of permanent supportive housing units. We already have about 800 units of permanent supportive housing, which is 0 to 30% affordable with services attached. And with the resolution, I think it was number 1136 that you passed 2 weeks ago, that would increase in 10 years to about 2,800. So Tanya is not tracking the services, but we will be doing a deep dive with the Joint Office of Homeless Services in Multnomah County to get to a sustainable package. And as you know, within the bond framework plan that you adopted as a council, there are some 300 units of 0 to 30 units set aside for supportive housing. That will make a difference. The other thing that is important to mention is that the bond also, as approved by voters, is half the units are family-sized units. So we're going to start to see a mutual and concerted effort on family-sized units as well as supportive unit housing, which are not mutually exclusive, because families may have a member who has a disabling condition and could also be receiving supportive housing in a family-sized unit.
Well, thank you for that, and let me just state my expectation. We've asked some certified smart people to come back and at no later than 9 months with the roadmap on how we're going to actually build and fund the permanent supportive housing units. That does not prevent us in the current cycle from meeting some goals, and my hope is that we set a goal of at least 100 units over the next year. When the roadmap comes back, obviously you're going to have a big piece of this because you're going to tell us how we do the bricks and sticks piece. And then the county, the city, Home Forward, and other partners are going to have to come up with the service dollars. Does that accurately state the issue?
It's a joint and unified effort.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Daly.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a stat you just shared, which I find quite troubling. We know that in Portland, about half of our residents are renters and about half of them are cost burdened, and that's people both on the open market and living in income-restricted housing. But you just said that within the income-restricted housing, 57% are cost burdened?
57% are paying more than 30% of their income on rent.
Okay, so, I mean, that begs a few questions for me. Did they have a reduction in income? I mean, how did they qualify for housing that they couldn't technically afford? Is it a reduction in income? Is it an increase in the rent? Or is it we just want to stick them in the housing that is closest to being affordable to them?
So tenants can choose to be rent burdened
Okay.
at move-in. We do screen for both their income and how that is related to the rent. And right now, we are requiring our borrowers to allow 1.5 income to rent, meaning that tenants can choose to be rent burdened up to 67%.
Okay. So that choice it looks like it may have something to do with the fact that we have many more units available at the 60% MFI than below, or do people just really
Colleague, I think this is a fantastic discussion. I'm guessing that in part, this is a consequence of our policy that allows someone's status and income to change, but we have a policy of not wanting to evict them.
Right.
So someone who has become comfortable in an apartment where their circumstances may change or the financing may change, I think we err on the side of allowing someone to continue in place. That could result in someone being more cost burdened. I think your data that you share with us frequently is that It's the cost burden at 50, 60% that's more pervasive in our community. So someone who's above 30 but below 40, while that's not cause for a parade, it is still better than what they would be facing in the private market. And I think the challenge is, how do we have flexible enough guidelines so that someone can continue to live in place, which we want to promote, even as their circumstances and the financing of the unit circumstances change?
Sure, I'm just.
And I would
very-
add that in the instance where we're combining housing choice vouchers, sometimes known as Section 8, with housing units that we finance, a household's decline in income would result in their rent going down, because the federal voucher ensures that no one is paying more than 30% of their income for rent and utilities. So if you're a minimum wage worker and your employer puts you on part-time wages, you can essentially report that loss of income and get an adjustment, a mid-year, mid-cycle. So we do have a significant number of voucher holders in PHB stock, which have that protection, but not everyone is afforded that same level of protection.
Sure, and that was my next question. I think there's an assumption that rents would be pegged to income, but we have units at, fixed levels.
And the
Can you talk
developers,
about-
largely nonprofits, have
Yeah.
debt, which they have to repay to their tax credit investors. So they cannot usually underwrite their rents at below cost without some sort of offsetting financial assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fritz?
Was there any public input into developing these policies and guidelines?
I'm not sure that.
Happy to do it.
We did work with Oregon on Now Housing Oregon, and talked with both of their asset and property management working groups. And it's been sort of ongoing over time. So we've actually been conducting compliance for years. And we really worked with them to have these make sense to them. And so we really worked with quite a few of our borrowers for feedback.
It didn't go through the commission, the
PHAC?
Portland, what's that stand for, Craig?
Well, it did. I can say that when you said that you earlier said that we're codifying some existing policies. When Director Van Vliet launched the new bureau, one of her charges was compiling all of these guidelines. Some were legacy of Portland Development Commission, some were Housing Bureau. They were, in fact, reviewed with the PHAC, the Portland Housing Advisory Commission. They do have their own oversight body, which has some administrative authority. And my understanding is what you're simply doing now is codifying these. They were already the practice, but you're putting them in code. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's very helpful, thank you.
And are you, just following on Commissioner Fritz's line, these do not add or subtract from the existing authority, right? So whatever authority you have to do some debt forgiveness or restructuring or things like that, you're not adding or subtracting, you're just codifying what your existing authority?
Correct.
That is correct. I would add that by the end of the year, we expect to come back to council with 2 additional policy directives. One is what we call tenants rising, incomes rising in place, so that in a tax credit property, you may qualify at or below 60% of AMI on move-in. If your income then goes up, you're not required to move out under federal rules. And we need to codify that policy and procedure in our own manuals, but that's currently not in place, so we feel like we need to come back to you with that policy.
And I think on that point, you've heard from the council that, particularly with bond proceeds, we don't want to be in a situation of acquiring properties and evicting people.
And we'll come back to you with that specific articulated policy, which is, as we are buying existing apartment complexes during a state of emergency, we don't want to create displacement as a measure. So it'll apply to both tenants rising in place and what we call holdover tenants, tenants who are on premises with a lease that we don't want to essentially disturb or displace.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Is there any public testimony on this item?
Yes, Mary Sipe.
Come on up. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So one of the things that's been mentioned by other people testifying on affordable housing is that...
Mary, could you get a little closer just so we can hear you?
I'm always afraid I'm getting too close. Is that just right?
Perfect, thank you.
Goldilocks. that affordable housing, the people that are sleeping on the sidewalks in tents have zero income. And how are they going to qualify for affordable housing when they have zero income? And one of the things I mentioned last week in my testimony was the inability of some people to apply for programs such as SSI and food stamps and things like that that would get them into housing. And I think this is something that we should really be thinking about, because there are a lot of the people out there that qualify for benefits that would put them in, say, a 50 or 40 or even 60%. And I actually tried to help a person that you probably are aware of. His name is Michael, and he's all over downtown Portland, and he wears a blue blanket all the time. Michael is a veteran, and I contacted the VA outreach program a couple of summers ago trying to find out his story after talking to him. And he gets about a 40% VA disability, but he also would qualify for SSI, food stamps, and 100% VA disability. I got a social worker from the VA to come and meet with him on the street 4 times during the summer, and she did everything in her power to try and help him apply for the benefits that he deserves. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't go into these buildings. He won't go in to apply for for food stamps. What I think we need to do is to have like a van and bring the people out on the streets who can sit in a van with someone, help them get their food stamps, help them go through the SSI process and other benefits that they can get. We need to go out there to where they are and help them. They are going to continue to be on the streets. They're going to fall through the cracks until we figure out a way to reach out and help them. And so this is just one idea that came to my mind, and I'd like to see, the Housing Bureau kind of think outside of the box and think, how can we qualify these people to take advantage of affordable housing? So, and I also want to say I really appreciate the conversation about the people whose incomes go up and the people who are burdened. In my particular situation, almost 60% of my Social Security goes to my rent in affordable housing. I could move into a smaller unit, but it would be 4 years before one would be available. So every time, and my rent goes up very minimally, $5 maybe. It went up $20 this year, which is the biggest hike I've ever had. But my Social Security doesn't always go up to accommodate that, or the increase in, say, my Medicare Part B premium, so.
Commissioner Daly.
Mayor, thank you. Mary, thank you for your testimony, and I like your idea. We know that there are a lot of people struggling out there without benefits that they absolutely qualify for. I know that through the joint office, we do something, I think the program's called Benefit Recovery, so that once we have someone in the system, we're certainly helping them access Social Security, Medicare, food stamps, but it's incredibly challenging in the kind of situation that you've mentioned. And I am actually curious, Director Krieger, you mentioned that there's a federal policy of not evicting people once they disqualify income-wise, and I completely support not wanting to displace people during a housing crisis, even if their income is 100% of MFI, because we know they still can't afford market rate rents. But I am concerned that there could be people earning more than 100% of MFI who certainly could qualify, and they are taking up precious spots in our affordable housing, and perhaps that's something we can't do anything about because of federal law.
Director
Well,
Krieger.
since that's a question, I'd be happy to respond. Thank you, Commissioner Daly.
Name for the record again, please.
Kurt Krieger, Director of Housing. I think the best way in which you can accommodate this population is to have a mixed income property where some of the tax credit units are augmented with market rate units, and you can essentially move the over income tenant into a market rate unit. The difficulty is that many of our developers, in order to maximize the equity from the tax credits, have created 100% tax credit buildings. And therefore, when a household income exceeds that, and Tanya's staff document this every year when we recertify the rents for a particular building. There's no place else in the building for them to go. So it does reinforce the efficacy of having mixed income properties where there is some latitude in which to move people into an unsubsidized unit so that you charge them a market rent. And they're still well-located properties, well-managed properties, and people don't have to move their children out of school.
And I mean, I'm certainly a fan of mixed income developments. I don't like the idea of segmenting people by income. So it's the case that we would have to physically move a household into another unit. We couldn't just say, well, you've reached X percentage of MFI, we're going to raise the rent on their existing unit. That's not allowed. It has to.
You cannot increase it beyond the allowed tax credit rents. Tanya is more of an expert in this than I am. But, I know that we have some tenants in place in the Pearl who were displaced homemakers, had children, they qualified under 60% of median income. With the rising economy, they were reemployed in their profession of choice, and some of them are professionals, and they have a particularly good deal where they are. Public housing, I might add, is the same way, and that is that you can be over 80% of median income and live in public housing. In Northern Virginia, where I last worked, we had tenants there. What we did with that population is we targeted our home ownership marketing efforts to that group by saying, you've done a great job. Now we want to help you get to the next level, and incentivized their movement out of those public housing units by offering them a unit for sale. We could probably do a little bit better job of that here in Portland by helping create the next ladder, the next rung on the ladder, so that they have a place to go. Because right now, in a tight market, they look at their options and they're perfectly happy to pay less than 30% of their income for rent.
Yeah.
But we haven't afforded them another choice, another way out.
Mary, can I make one comment?
Commissioner Fisher.
Your observation, you said the gentleman's name is Michael?
Yes.
We've all seen him downtown. Thank you for, it's not surprising to me that you've stepped in. So I'll mask the name, but a number of years ago, a veteran who hangs out in front of Pete's on Northeast Broadway was the subject of what I'll just call an intervention. People who shopped at the store, raised some money, a local property owner carved out a unit, the VA came in and did some extraordinary things. I won't say we cut corners, but I would just say that when you put a lot of talented people together, you fix problems. He ended up getting kind of a golden ticket, which is he got a very nice apartment in a nice building in the neighborhood in which he had been chronically homeless forever. And I wish I could tell you that the story had a happy ending. But because he had been chronically homeless for so long, he really found it impossible to be a successful tenant. And ultimately, he took a trip, did not pay attention to any of the lease obligations, lost his apartment, and was back on the street. Now, that's just that's a slice of the challenge we're dealing with. That's why we talk about services and housing. If this gentleman had had intensive services married with his housing, he had a fighting chance. But he was back on the street, and he had been on the street for so long, it just became almost it was chronic, and it was very hard for him to change certain behavioral patterns. He also had both a mental illness and a drug addiction. So to your point, though, about streamlining the entry points, we do have two programs that people should know about. We do fund Central City Concern, and they do Social SSI. And the benefit there is when someone's eligible, it goes retroactive, so it covers medical bills that are already in the pipeline and prospective, and the city funds that. And we also fund Cash Oregon, which helps people qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit, a program that the Republicans in the Senate now are claiming it's so ripe with fraud and abuse, they want to scale it back to cover other tax breaks. But those are two examples of programs the city funds precisely, to your point, to get people eligible for those programs.
And if we could somehow, because I'm aware of this in trying to help my family member years ago, but again, if we could somehow find a way to go out to where they are instead of having them go to like Central City Concern and places like that, because they're often afraid to do that.
Absolutely right.
And in fact, Michael told me that they won't let him in the office to apply for food stamps. And And remember that name, you know, it really changed things once I found out his name, and everybody in our neighborhood now knows him by name and calls him by name, and he's become a real person, not just the man in the blue blanket, or as some people referred to him as Smurfit, which just infuriated me. So,
Great. Thank you. Last testimony, and then we'll move it.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog X. And again, my position is on the property management aspect of the units. And again, from Portland Housing Bureau's position, just to begin with, is on any of the projects, if the financing is in jeopardy and they go in default, I want to make sure that's looked at immediately and the amount of debt is not relieved or not being expected to be paid on these type of units. I want to make sure that even if it's extended out many, many years, that we still get that money in return back. Now, issue number 2 on the property management side is that when we're talking the permanent supportive housing, in my mind is that if you develop a 50 units to 100 unit apartment building, that we really need to start understanding that any unit in that building can be permanent supportive housing. And with that in mind, we need to really start addressing the manager on site, more specialized training in drug addictions, mental illness, and understanding on how to deal with, like was stated, a person that has been chronic homeless for many years and is adapting to living indoors again. And it's the same concept which I'm been trying to push, is that in my belief, every person that's chronically homeless should be set up on the plan of receiving a certain amount of income per month at a certain point. And I've talked to you on that, and why that is that the trauma suffered over the years is that we can't all just have that mindset is that just go out and get a job, everything will be fine. That's not realistic when someone suffered trauma over, say, 3 to 5 to 10 years. There's going to be a time that there needs to be an understanding, housing first, provide the services, make sure the managers in place can understand and work with that tenant in a reasonable manner, check in with them, make sure they're going to certain locations, make sure they're provided certain services, is essential to begin to training these managers in position with that experience, and possibly even the city offering grants to landlords, private landlords that are willing to do that. And understanding that the Portland Police have a lot of influence also on the landlords themselves on who may or may not be in the properties. I had an experience with law enforcement on that, and I told them, you don't tell me who's going to be in these properties. And their exact quote to me was, if they're doing any type of drugs, you better get them out of there. And I said, but if they're going into treatment, I'm going to keep them in these properties. And they said to me, we will bring down every federal agency down upon you and we will destroy you. And I looked at that officer and I said, bring it on, my friend, because I can get a pack on my back and walk out the door. And that's what I've done. And let me tell you something. Landlords have a right to stand up for their tenants. Landlords have a right to understand that the people out on the streets are the fabric of this community, and to assist them in any way you can, and to hope that the city will offer grants to private landlords to step in and say, I will take that person off the street into my building, and I will make sure my manager is well trained to assist them and keep them in my property. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Commissioner Saltzman has requested a very quick review of 1189, which I think
1190.
I'm sorry, 1190, which I think we can get through in a couple of minutes here.
Yeah.
Please call 1190.
Sorry. 1190, authorize a purchase order with Pierce Manufacturing, Inc. for 4 fire apparatus for a total not to exceed amount of $2,800,000.
Colleagues, are there any, or sorry, Commissioner?
Yeah, I would just like to say this is the authorization for 4 fire apparatus paid entirely out of the 2010 general obligation bond that voters graciously approved. And we have To answer any questions, we have our newest Deputy Chief, Sarah Boone, and Jay Guo, if there's any questions of the council.
Colleagues, any further questions? Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one
Call
signed
the
up.
roll.
Udaly,
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Saltzman,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance
you.
is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we will go to the first time certain item. And colleagues, again, I'm sorry, I have an obligation for the next 15 or so minutes, so I'll turn this over to the council president. But if you could please read item
1177.
1177. Thank you.
Authorize a grant agreement between Portland Parks and Recreation and Portland Parks Foundation for $500,000 for the Wildwood Trail pedestrian bridge.
I'm sorry, we're just going back onto 1190, as Commissioner Udaly pointed out, it's indicated as a emergency ordinance. So we need to call the roll, right? Excuse me for another minute.
Okay, sorry, I thought we did 3.
We
We
did
have
call
4
the
people
roll.
here, yeah.
Did we do that? I'm sorry, what was your concern, Commissioner Udaly?
Well, 1177 is also an emergency, and I thought we were going
Oh.
to use quorum, sorry.
No, thank you.
Yeah, 1187 was a first reading of a non-emergency, moved to second. 1190, we took the roll.
And now we're on 1177.
Okay, we're good? Good.
yes.
All right, I'm turning over the gavel for a moment. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you, Mayor and colleagues. So Portland Parks and Recreation owns and has responsibility for the operation and maintenance of Washington Park and Forest Park. The Parks Bureau and community have identified the construction of the Wildwood pedestrian bridge as a priority for the 1998 Portland Pedestrian Master Plan. On November 23rd, 2016, the City Council authorized the transfer of an amount not to exceed $500,000 of city funding to the Portland Parks Foundation on evidence that the foundation has raised the remaining funds necessary to complete the bridge project. The current project is estimated at $2.5 million. So with this transfer, the Portland Parks Foundation has committed to the funding project, management design, permitting and construction of the Wildwood Trail pedestrian bridge project. And Portland Parks and Recreation would now like permission to enter into the grant agreement with the Parks Foundation to provide the mechanism for the foundation to provide these services to fund, project manage and construct the Wildwood Trail pedestrian bridge. Welcome Director Mike Abate and Parks Foundation Executive Director Jeff Anderson.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members of Council, Mike Abate, Director of Portland Parks and Recreation. And with me, obviously, again, is Jeff Anderson, the Executive Director, and also Robin Craig, a landscape architect and our project manager on this project for parks. So we're really excited to introduce this presentation about another great partnership between Portland Parks and Recreation and the Portland Parks Foundation. The foundation has worked tirelessly for 15 years. They've raised over $12 million to help the city fund projects that advance the excellence, accessibility, and stewardship of the city of Portland Parks. And today we're here, as the Commissioner said, to authorize a grant agreement between Portland Parks and Recreation and the Portland Parks Foundation for $500,000 to help facilitate the implementation of a fabulous new pedestrian bridge across Northwest Burnside, the Wildwood Trail Pedestrian Bridge, which will serve the public interest. On November 23rd, 2016, Council authorized a transfer of an amount not to exceed $500,000 to Portland Parks Foundation upon evidence that it had raised the remaining funds required to complete the bridge project, currently estimated at $2.5 million. And as the foundation has met this requirement, this ordinance provides the mechanism for release of that funding. Portland Parks and Recreation has been working well and will continue to work closely with PBOT Director Leah Treat, Dan Layden, Alex Bejarano, Jody Yates, and others in PBOT on this important project, and we very much thank them for their active participation in the process. So let me give you a little context here. Here's a map. Portland Parks and Recreation currently owns and has responsibility for the operations and maintenance of 2 signature parks within the Portland Park system. Washington Park, shown in green on the south side of Northwest Burnside near Barnes Road, and Forest Park on the north side. This image shows a portion of the Wildwood Trail in a red line and the crossing point of Northwest Burnside at the point of the blue arrow. But let's get it a little more clear. This image highlights our joint Portland Parks, Portland Bureau of Transportation, and Portland Parks Foundation recognition of the need for a safe pedestrian crossing for the Wildwood Trail users, where the trail crosses Northwest Burnside. The need for this bridge has been identified as a capital project in several city planning documents, such as the 1995 Forest Park Natural Resources Management Plan, the 1998 Portland Pedestrian Plan, City Capital Project number 75, and the 2007 Portland Transportation System Plan, City Capital Project number 60024. The project is also a priority in the Washington Park Master Plan, and it will serve the public interest. And as mentioned earlier, it has been on our Parks CIP as an unfunded project for 22 years.
Mike, before you leave that photograph, is concurrent with this project, are the utilities going to be burying the electrical lines?
Yes, that's a key part of this project is to relocate the utility lines in this corridor near the bridge crossing.
And they'll be buried?
Yes.
Wow.
No,
No, they're not buried.
They'll just be relocated?
they will be relocated.
Okay.
We do not direct the utilities on how they relocate.
Well, we have some say. We have the
We
dirt.
ask them to
but-
relocate.
Okay.
So another photograph of the site, which shows the condition a little more clearly. In 2013 and 2014, next slide.
Sorry.
The Parks Foundation did some research on the existing conditions and documented the hazards faced by Wildwood Trail users. Nearly 500,000 people visit Forest Park every year. As many as 80,000 pedestrians a year on the Wildwood Trail cross there at Burnside. And in any peak traffic hour, this Northwest Burnside street crossing has approximately 2,000 cars go past and 20 people attempting to cross the street. This project responds to the safety aspects of this crossing, and it responds connectivity as well as safety for everyone, helping to make a continuous 40-mile loop trail a reality. As you know, Portland Parks and Recreation has a very long list of unfunded important projects on our CIP list, and our partner, the Portland Parks Foundation, is making this pedestrian bridge crossing a reality for the benefit of all Portlanders. Here's a site plan that blows up a little bit of where the crossing is, shows the details of the current trail in green and the proposed bridge location. Back in 2001, when Council adopted the 2020 Vision Plan, a need for a strategic fundraising partner was identified. As a result, Portland Parks Foundation was formed to bring new resources and constituencies to long-term stewardship of parks and recreation. The city and PP&R are very thankful to the foundation for their hard work at fulfilling its goals. A great deal of time, energy, and effort has been successfully expended to help make this project a reality. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Anderson, the Executive Director of the Foundation.
Thank you very much, Mike. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yes, I am Jeff Anderson, Executive Director of the Portland Parks Foundation. Members of the council, I really appreciate the chance to talk with you today. As Mike said, thousands of Wildwood Trail users and people living in the neighborhoods around Forest Park have been aware of the hazards at the trail's Burnside crossing for many years. At the same time, the community understands and supports PP&R's priority to use these relatively scarce capital funds for both the long list of maintenance needs and also to create public parks in areas of our city that have lacked access to their recreational health benefits for far too long. In 2013, local community residents and leaders began planning seriously for a solution to this hazardous crossing. And there are a number of folks here today, actually. I'd like to acknowledge Andrew Wheeler in particular, who have been working hard on this campaign. As the studies that Mike referred to suggested, the best solution would be a footbridge. Built well, a footbridge would cost more upfront, but it would minimize long-term maintenance costs, and amortizing the construction expense over the long life of the structure would be very cost-efficient. The local group raised some early funds to produce materials. They asked the Parks Foundation to get involved, and they enlisted artist Ed Carpenter, also here today, to design a footbridge that would both resolve the safety issues and stand as an elegant public artwork appropriate to the forest setting, something that would really make the city proud. So that's the design you see, if we can switch to that design. on the slide. So a few words about that quickly. It embeds the shapes of sword ferns and vine maples that are prevalent in the forest along the Wildwood Trail. Unlike many footbridges, it looks light, it almost floats, with the intention for it to fit sort of seamlessly into the forest, that creating an uninterrupted experience for walkers and runners. And at the same time, it's built of steel and very sturdy, so it's intended to be easy to maintain and literally to last for generations. So with this conceptual design in hand, the campaign leaders set about involving the community. They publicized the project in local media, earned the endorsement of local organizations that are concerned with the Wildwood Trail, and these endorsements now include, among others, Forest Park Conservancy, Friends of Hoyt Arboretum, Pittock Mansion, Explore Washington Park, the 40 Mile Loop Land Trust, and many of the neighborhood associations that are nearby. The wider community has also been learning about this project over the past year from a public meeting that we held up at the World Forestry Center, and also from TV, radio, print, and online media coverage. So because it illustrates how the Parks Foundation partners productively with the city, I'd like to share a brief history of the funding of the footbridge. So early in 2015, the community asked for seed funds from the city, and Mayor Hales allocated the $500,000 in funds that are being discussed today. This turned out to be hugely productive, as it gave private donors confidence that the city was invested in a solution. Looking back, by the end of 2015, about 2 years ago, the footbridge campaign counted $70,000 in private support, in addition to that city money that had been pledged. Today, the campaign counts approximately $2 million in private gifts and pledges secured from almost 1,000 donors. In addition, Metro has pledged $200,000. The capping effort just recently was a crowdfunding campaign that we conducted with Oregon's Kitchen Table that ended last week. It attracted 660 donors who gave almost $185,000 in 34 days. And 86% of those donations were in amounts of $100 or less. So we think this demonstrates a broad base of support for the project out there. This entire effort, including individuals, foundations, businesses, and public bodies, would not have happened without great community leadership, people who are raising private funds for the public good. And I'd especially like to thank the creative and, again, tireless, using your word, tireless members of our steering committee, Campaign Chair Charlie Swindells, Ian Walker, Zeri Santner, Doug Oblitz, Doug Macy, and Julie Vigeland. There are many more folks, too numerous to mention really, who also deserve our thanks for spreading the word about the project and giving generously to see it happen. In recent weeks, PP&R, the Foundation, and the City Attorney's Office have been working cooperatively, PBOT staff as well, to create the grant agreement that you have within your packet. It outlines how PPF will deliver the bridge project for the city. So briefly, 3 points. The intent is for the foundation to fundraise, to project manage, to design, to secure permits, and construct the footbridge. As Mike said earlier, the proposed ordinance represents the fund transfer mechanism to pay the foundation for these services. The construction work performed by the foundation will be subject to the grant agreement, which is Exhibit A. It's quite detailed, as you'll see. So in closing, I would like to mention one of our campaign's greatest inspirations. Just over 3 years ago, as this effort was getting underway, Portland lost one of its most admired and beloved volunteer civic leaders, Barbara Walker. A number of you on the council, the city staff, and others in the room today knew Barbara. Her leadership was vital to the creation of landmarks in Portland, such as Markham Nature Park, McCall Waterfront Park, Pioneer Courthouse Square, the Springwater Corridor, and the 40 Mile Loop that connects them. When Mayor Hales met with Footbridge campaign leaders, he suggested that when the bridge was built, it should be named for Barbara. We found throughout many informal conversations and presentations with donors that this idea really resonated deeply. Thus, it's the Parks Foundation's proposal to build the footbridge over Burnside, helping to complete the 40 Mile Loop in honor of Barbara Walker, and we hope that the city will agree that this is a fitting tribute. So we want to extend our deep thanks to Commissioner Fritz, to all of you on the council who followed our progress and given your support, and to the staff of PP&R, PBOT, the City Attorney's Office, and others who have dedicated time to make the footbridge a reality. And we hope the results will prove the continuing value of creative public-private partnerships. Thank you.
Mike, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The earlier slide gave the indication that this walkway might be enclosed, and so I was glad to see the second one.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
open
open.
throughout.
It's open to the air, yeah.
Good, okay.
Thank you, Jeff, and members of council. It's clear that the benefits of this partnership are enormous. The Wildwood Pedestrian Bridge represents an elegant solution to a long-term need, and it's been endorsed by the community through various outreach efforts. I think it's also important to mention that it helps the city achieve some important city policies, such as supporting Vision Zero, ensuring that Portland Parks and Recreation's recreation legacy will continue for future generations, improving access for all and serving the public interest, protecting against the degradation of forest park ecosystems, and increasing habitat and protecting water quality. It also represents a unique cooperative partnership between parks, the foundation, and members of the Portland community. I want to thank Jeff and the Portland Parks Foundation team specifically, as well as key staff from Portland Parks and Recreation and the City Attorney's Office who've worked, I won't use that word again, worked long and hard to make this day possible. So from Parks, Project Manager Robin Craig, Lauren McGuire, our Assets and Development Manager Ramiro Villabaso, and Jennifer Yoakum. And also, the City Attorney's Office has been incredibly helpful. So Molly Washington and Ben Walters, we owe them a debt of gratitude as well. In conclusion then, we're asking council to authorize a grant agreement between Portland Parks and Recreation and Portland Parks Foundation for $500,000 for the Portland Parks Foundation to fund, project manage, design, permit, and construct the Wildwood Trail pedestrian bridge. This concludes the presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I just have one question. Mike, what's the last example of a project of this magnitude where the foundation was put in the lead in terms of managing the construction? Because we think of the foundation as an entity that raises money and awareness and does lots of partnerships. But here they're going to be also cast in the role of project manager, which is not without complication. Do we have a precedent for that?
I think the closest precedent we have, Commissioner, is that the foundation was directly involved in, Commissioner Fritz knows well, and that's the Holly Farm Park. Holly Farm Park, the Portland Parks Foundation solicited the design, ran the design and construction project, and so that's probably the closest parallel.
So, and I appreciate that this action puts them in the lead, but the truth is that you and your bureau have the expertise in delivering projects like this. So how do you anticipate the bureau and the foundation working together to accomplish this goal?
Well, thank you, Commissioner. It's an important question. I would say that actually the foundation has assembled quite a tremendous team. So from both the project management, Shields Oblitz Johnson, from their general contractors and subcontractors, they have put together a stellar team with lots of experience in building bridges. So we feel comfortable with that. I'd also say that there's been a lot of dialogue between the foundation and parks to ensure that when this is done, the project is up to city standards and will last a very long time. So we have great confidence in the team put together for this.
But just to be clear, Mike, your team at Parks will be working closely with the foundation team in partnership to deliver this project? Because, I mean, Parks has, hundreds of years of experience doing this work.
Right.
This is slightly new for the foundation. And they've obviously assembled a fantastic team. But I want to be sure that the Parks partnership is helping to deliver the high-quality product that we expect.
Yes, we are, Commissioner, and we are involved in various inspections and ensuring that the project is built as specified before the city accepts it upon completion. So.
Good.
I love this project. I don't need to hear anything more about it.
I think we're ready
it's
for public testimony
fantastic.
now.
Public testimony on this item.
We have one person signed up, Joe Walsh.
And Mary, did you want to be on
And
too?
Mary's site.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? All right, we'll close the list. Good morning.
Morning again. So for about 2 years, I lived a number of years ago up at the top of Burnside, and I commuted Burnside, Barnes Road, every day to and from work. And I used to be just terrified when I would come around that corner. I can't tell you how many times, how many close calls I saw. If you're not familiar with, anybody in the audience who's not familiar with this area, you cannot believe how treacherous and dangerous it is. And if you're coming east, it's right on a curve. So if you try to slow down or stop for somebody who's crossing, the cars behind you are going to rear end you because they cannot see that.
And it's downhill.
And it's downhill. And one afternoon when I was going up the road, it had just rained, and there was a hiker running across the street, and he slipped on the wet pavement in the middle of the street. And I can tell you, I thought for sure I was going to see a terrible tragedy. Luckily, there wasn't a lot of traffic, and he survived his fall and got across the street. But I just think this is so long overdue, and I can't say enough in support of this particular project. And I'm really impressed with the design and everything that's gone into this, and good job. I think this is one of these things where we're talking about a lot of money, but it's a responsibility also to protect the citizens of our community, and so, way to go.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Good morning. My name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. Nothing I say should give you the impression that I'm against this, because it does. What the mayor said is true. It's an exciting kind of a project. And it's long overdue. I think 21 years is that what we threw out on this one. We're a little bit slow on the uptake, aren't we? I mean, if this was so dangerous and it took us 21 years, we should move faster than that, But our objection or concern is east versus west. And we're getting a little nervous about spending a lot of money on the west side. This is 500 grand. Not chuck change, it's not lunch money, it's a lot of money. And there's also a $100,000 maintenance fee that you're going to pay every year to run the bridge. That's what the documents say. The supporting documents that I read that were online are very confusing. It seems like there was almost no community input into this. And I can't believe that after 21 years, there must have been somebody said something from the community about this. And it seems like a really good problem. But let me throw this out. Is there any statistics that show from year to year how much money is being spent on the east side versus the west side of money? There must be something somewhere. Let me get egg on my face on this one. I think the east side is getting screwed. You know why? Because I live on 74th Street and Division, very close to 82nd. When I cross 82nd, I'm in the Badlands. There's no sidewalks. There's no streets. So you got this. You got a walkway that's going to cost you a couple $1 million, and you got people living in mud when it rains. So if we are spending the same amount of money on the east side as we are on the west side, we are wrong. We got to bring them up to par. We got to give them streets. They're in mud during the rainy season, and in the hot season, they're in dust. But you're going to have a nice bridge going across Washington Park. I don't know which one should be concerned about. The priorities seem to be wrong. And there's more money on the west side, so the foundation can raise more money. It's the same thing as about schools. We go through the same thing with the schools. All right? You have to make exceptions on the east side and stop screwing around with them, because we're getting a little annoyed. We feel like step people.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And I do like the idea.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Well, thank you for the presentation. It's a beautiful bridge. I'm excited to see this project move forward. I've spent a lifetime visiting both Washington and Forest Park, and those are two separate trips for me. I've never attempted to cross the Wildwood Trail because I'd rather not take my life into my own hands, at least not in that particular location. And I understand and agree with concerns about equity. There are reports, I think, that the public can access through the city that show how we're spending, and we are deeply investing in East County and parks and roads and affordable housing. But of course, we have a lot of catch-up. It's my personal feeling that these parks are such treasures. There's nothing else like them in the city. The only thing I miss about living in Northwest Portland is my proximity to these parks. And it, in this case, really doesn't matter to me where they are located. This bridge is needed, and I'm happy to vote aye.
Fritz.
Thank you very much to the Foundation for working on this. I see former Parks Director Zari Santner in the audience, and this has been a dream a long time in coming, and so we really appreciate the Foundation and the donors for making that work, and as was reported, hundreds of small donations as well as some particularly magnificent ones. I'm sorry that Mr. Walsh has left because I was going to point out I've spent over $40 million so far in East Portland, not just on the east side of the river, but in East Portland, further than 82nd. And next week in the evening, 6 o'clock at David Douglas High School, we will be accepting 3 master plans for East Portland parks, and also just holding the entire afternoon, evening session there. So we will be giving a short presentation on what we've been doing in investments in different realms as well as parks. And I encourage everybody to come to David Douglas High School. It's always a very interesting place to be with all the flags of the nations of the students that represent that high school. Again, thank you very much. Aye.
Fish?
Well, first I want to thank Commissioner Fritz for bringing this home. Mayor Hales for putting in his budget, and I was an enthusiastic supporter of this allocation. I don't have to remind the people in this room, but I guess it's worth noting that Forest Park and Washington Park are significant regional attractions. They are not the privileged enclave of one side of the river. They're not, or the other. They serve the entire region. And therefore, when we make these kinds of investments, we're investing in the experience that people have regionally in this beautiful park system. I had the pleasure of working with Shields Oblis Johnson on a little project that wasn't too complicated involving 3 steam locomotives. And there was no way in the world that project should have gotten to the finish line. So if they can do that one, this one is just, they'll do this one in their sleep. You know, the Parks Bureau does not function without strong partnerships. And I think the last number, Commissioner Fritz, that I remember was over 100, maybe 120 robust partnerships with groups in our community that step up and raise money for good causes. And it allows us to serve more people and do more good. And without it, as we know, we just don't have the resources. So I really want to thank the Parks Foundation for stepping up. I want to thank Charlie and Julie and Zari and all the public-spirited people that dug deep, because these things don't happen without public-spirited people stepping up. You know, I now walk to work. I live in Goose Hollow, and I get to experience the majesty of both Forest Park and Washington Park on a regular basis. And I think this is a splendid addition in terms of connectivity. And I think the suggestion that we name it after Barbara Walker is inspired. Zari, you'll remember when Dr. Toulon was still alive, that fantastic event we had at PSU when we named her an urban pioneer, and we celebrated all of her work. I can't think of someone more deserving. And the way she has single-handedly over her life pursued that vision of connecting the 40-mile loop, connecting all parts of the city, I think is a beautiful tribute to her. I can't wait till this is up and running, and I just have run out of gratitude for all the people who brought us this moment. Thank you all, and congratulations. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, this is a great partnership. It is something that's long overdue, and as Portland becomes more populated and people seek refuge in our forest, this crossing is really extremely hazardous and perilous today. So this bridge is going to save lives. I am convinced of that. And it's going to add to the experience of Washington Park and Forest Park. I want to thank in particular Mr. Swindell, Zary Santner, Bob Shoemaker, John Sherman. I'm sure you had a hand in this as well. It's great to see so many advocates for Forest Park and Washington Park here in the audience, and I know you've worked very hard to make this reality, and thanks to the foundation for embarking on this, and thanks to our taxpayers for supporting this with this vote. Aye.
Wheeler.
So I'm not going to take any credit where credit is not due. I am a passenger on this one, but I'm a grateful passenger, and I know many of the people who are in this room. Charlie, thank you, and Zary, thank you. And to all of you who've worked tirelessly on this for many, many years, thank you. This would not have happened without the partnership that's been established here through the foundation and without the philanthropic and volunteer resources of the people in this community who work together with City Hall to make this happen. It hurts Mr. Walsh's cred when I agree with him, so I'll do it quietly so I don't hurt his cred. But I agree with him. I agree. He's saying just a little bit. I agree with him. It did take too long to get this done. And, but I think the success that this project will bring will incite other people to also come to the table and say, you know, we've got other needs in this community. Maybe we should also do the same kind of partnership and see what we can build together to help move the community forward. I agree with what Commissioner Fritz said earlier and what Commissioner Fish said earlier about this being more than just a West Side asset. This really is a citywide asset. It is used broadly by the city. And as Commissioner Fish said, people come from all over the region to enjoy what is truly one of the most remarkable urban forested settings in the entire United States of America. And ever since I was a little kid here, I've loved hiking on the Wildwood Trail, and it's always struck me as anomalous that you can walk 28-ish, 29-ish miles along the Wildwood Trail, and then the last thing you have to do is you're heading south is dodge across what I'll call the Burnside Highway at what Mary correctly pointed out is actually a blind corner. It's crazy. It's nuts. It's taking your life into your hands. And so this need has been there for a long time. You have all stepped forward to make this happen. There is no Parks Commissioner, I believe, at least certainly not that I am aware of, who has been more committed than Commissioner Fritz has to increase funding for East Side parks. In every meeting I've had with her regarding this subject of equity, and in fact, in my very first meeting with her as mayor-elect, she made it very, very clear to me that she understood that we have not made the same kinds of investments historically east of the river that we have west when it comes to park infrastructure, and that a lot of people are moving east and there's more density there, and we don't have the parks commitment. She made it very clear to me that she was committed to playing catch up to help bring East Side parity, and there is data available, and I saw it just earlier this week. Mike Abate and I were at the East Portland Action Plan meeting, and we were going through all the data on transportation investments, on housing investments, and yes, on park investments. And the line on park investments is going like this on the east side. So, you know, this council under Commissioner Fritz's leadership and Mike and the staff's leadership has, is definitely aware of the situation on the east side of the river. That being said, this has been a withering need. Commissioner Fritz, thank you. Thanks to all of you in the room. As I said earlier, I just think this is a fantastic project. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Number 1178, please.
Authorize a grant agreement with a maximum possible total of $75,000 to Portland Parks Foundation for operational costs associated with fundraising and development services for Portland Parks and Recreation programs and projects for fiscal year 2017-18.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very glad to have these two items in close proximity because we just saw a great illustration of how the Portland Parks Foundation really helps us get things done in parks. Another one was there acting as the fiscal sponsor for the donations that we received in many different projects, and I appreciate that, and also the help that they gave on passing the Fix Our Parks bond measure. And so this is a one-time request to use some money that Mike Abate has been able to find in the parks budget, and there will be a request or a proposal to the Parks Budget Committee to make this ongoing, but that discussion will happen first at the Parks Budget Committee and next at the Council. So from me, thank you for the partnership, Portland Parks and Parks Foundation. Mike Abate, Director of Parks again.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mike Abate, Parks and Rec Director. Just in summary, last year we were able to provide $50,000 in operational support for the foundation, and when you sort of do the math on raising $2.5 million for $50,000, that is a fine investment of public funds. This item ahead of in front of you would authorize us, if funds are available, to provide up to $75,000 for this year only for operational support. And again, I want to underscore, should funding be available, and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Very good. Public testimony?
Joe Walsh.
Mr. Walsh, sir, would you like to testify on this item? It's your birthday today.
No, it's the whole month.
As well it should be.
My name is Joe Walsh, for the record, representing Individuals for Justice. We agree.
Please call the roll.
All of a sudden it's popped up. We actually got
Thank
some.
Oh, our monitors even came back on in shock.
Please call the roll.
Call the roll before he changes his mind.
You Daly.
I don't know what's going on in here today. Mr. Walsh, I'd like to just take a moment to respond. Mr. Walsh, I'd like to take a moment to respond to a question you had earlier about gaining better understanding of how we're spending our budget across the city. The city budget office has a page on their website called Budget Mapping. So if you just Google that, you can access budget maps for I don't know how many bureaus, multiple bureaus though, parks, PBOT, housing, et cetera. And with that, I vote aye.
Fritz.
Aye. Thank you.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Last item, 1179, please.
Appeal of the Northwest District Association against Design Commission's decision of approval for design review and modifications and master plan amendment for a new multi-story residential building with ground floor retail and a public square at 1417 Northwest 20th Avenue in the Conway Master Plan area of the Northwest Plan District, LU 16-100496, DZMMS.
Colleagues, the findings aren't yet ready for final adoption. I move to continue the hearing and take a final vote next week on, we need a time and date certain. Do we have that yet?
Yes, that will be November 8th at 11 a.m.
November 8th at 11 a.m. Can I get a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fritz seconds. Please call the roll.
You Daly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish. Aye. Saltzman.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The hearing is continued to November 8th at 11 a.m. And last but not least, 1188, please.
authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of the Fremont Pump Station Upgrade, project number E10543, for an estimated construction cost of $1,440,000.
Commissioner Fish.
We're joined today, Mayor, by Paul Sudo, BES engineer, and Brenda Sherwood, BES engineer. And Carla will help you get the PowerPoint teed up. Some brief talking points. The Fremont Pump Station conveys sewage to the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant and is located on Northeast Fremont Drive near Northeast 89th Avenue. Built in 1969, the pump station requires an upgrade to improve reliability and to accommodate future flows. I love these euphemisms. The upgrade will protect public health, water quality, and our environment. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul and Brenda for a very brief presentation.
For the record, I'm Paul Sudo, Principal Engineer, BES.
And I'm Brenda Sherwood, Project Manager with BES.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and members of the council. The Fremont Pump Station upgrade is a project in the Bureau's ongoing pump station improvement program, whereas Commissioner Fish had mentioned we have about 99 pump stations that we operate and maintain. So we work through about 8 to 10 pump stations per year being in design or construction. So now I'll turn it over to Brenda to give the details of this project.
Hello, Council.
Morning.
So the Fremont Pump Station is located at 2777 Northeast Fremont Drive. It is in the central northeast neighborhood of the Madison South Neighborhood Association. The property is located on BES property that is adjacent to a BES stormwater facility that's kind of outlined in blue there on the slide by the star. So the project objectives are basically to improve the pump station reliability, the safety and ease of maintenance, replace obsolete mechanical, electrical equipment, and resolve a pump clogging issue. As you can see from the photos at the bottom, on the left is an obsolete emergency generator, and in the center is one of the clogging problems where they've had to remove rags and flushable wipes, and on the right is one of the obsolete pumps. So the pump station was constructed in '69, was upgraded in 1995 with 3 pumps. The pumps were clogging once to twice a week, which was requiring significant manpower to declog. And our pump stations are typically upgraded every 25 years, which means this one's right on schedule, bumped up a little bit because of the pump clogging issue that has been manifesting. So we did do a pilot project in 2014 where we replaced one of the existing pumps with a new Hydrostall screw centrifugal pump, which has a different type of impeller that is able to move the strainy materials along without clogging. Since we've installed that pump, we've had no further cloggings, and our flow analysis was completed and agreed that the pump capacity is within the design. So this pump replacement project is also going to replace all the electrical and instrumentation equipment, the emergency generator, and we're also adding a flow meter for reliability and noise dampening equipment for the emergency generator and some odor treatment to the wet well air handling system. So the project construction schedule, basically we're planning to advertise for construction bids in next month in December with a bid opening in January to begin construction and issue notice to proceed in May for a year-long construction process to be completed by the end of June of 2019. Estimated construction cost is $1,440,000. Total estimated project cost to date for the design phase, $451,000, advertised phase, $27,000. Construction phase, including internal costs, is $1,992,000, and the startup closeout, $39,000. This comes to a total estimated project cost of $2,510,000.
Hey, go ahead and get
So our recommendation is to authorize this solicitation contract award to the lowest responsible bidder for the Fremont Pump Station.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Commissioner Fritz?
It's my understanding that a lot of this clogging is happening because of the flushable wipes, the so-called flushable
Correct.
wipes. So maybe could you include that in information to people? I remember when I did a tour of the wastewater treatment plant, there was a lot of the cotton swab things that people think you can just flush and they magically disappear, but in fact they then have to be strained out. So would you like us to do a little public service announcement as to what things people should flush and what they should not?
Yeah, we did. For one thing, the Bureau does do a lot of public service announcements on this. We include inserts into the billings and have it on our website. But for purposes of today, I think we did have something kind of noted here that in general, what we'll say is that these flushable wipes they can technically be flushed down your toilet, but they're going to plug up the pipes downstream as they work their way through. And it's not just a problem within the city of Portland, but in other areas around the country. So as Brenda mentioned, we saw an average of about 12 hours per week of maintenance just to unplug these. So I guess the public service announcement would be, don't flush your flushable wipes. Please put them in the garbage so we can reduce our maintenance in the collection system.
Thank you, because $1.4 million is a lot of money because people were just basically throwing things in that they shouldn't, right? And I would suggest that many of us now automatically deposits on our bills, so we don't get those bills anymore. And I may be shocked, but I don't always go to your website to find out what else is going on there. So I know the curbsider sometimes has information. You know, I think many people will do the right thing if they know what it is. And so when it says flushable, they would think it was, but the answer is it's not. So if you're watching this at home, please tell your neighbors.
Maybe we should add flushable wipes to our 2018 legislative agenda.
We always go right to the flushing, right before the every week. I don't know how we do this. How do we orchestrate
It's
this?
almost 12. This is the potty talk hour.
Yeah, it's like flushing your good taxpayer money.
People flush a lot of things into the system that they really shouldn't, and we'll continue to remind them, but there's a rule of common sense, and the stuff that clogs your toilet generally clogs our pump stations. And if people would be a little more considerate, we would not be having to do these unnecessary upgrades.
Very good. Any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
This is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. We are adjourned until 2 p.m. Thanks, everybody.